This is the new 2020 Jeep Gladiator, and it is the long-awaited pickup truck version of the Jeep Wrangler. And it's sort of a jack of all trades. It's a pickup truck, and it's an off-road SUV, and it's a convertible, and it's a family car. And today, I'm going to take you on a tour of it and give it a full review. First, a little overview. Now, the 2020 Jeep Gladiator is Jeep's first pickup truck since production of the Comanche ended in 1992, meaning that Jeep hasn't made a pickup in almost 30 years. But enthusiasts have asked for one. Wrangler fans have been asking Jeep to make a Wrangler pickup for years, to the point where several aftermarket companies have been converting Wranglers into pickup trucks since Jeep wouldn't do it. But now, finally, Jeep is making a pickup truck of its own. And it's this, the Gladiator, and here it is. Now, all Gladiator models will come with 4 doors, and they will also all come with 4-wheel drive. And the biggest competition is going to come from other mid-sized trucks like the Toyota Tacoma, the Chevy Colorado, and the Ford Ranger. Jeep is going to offer the Gladiator in 3 trim levels. The base model, the Sport, is going to start around $35,000 with shipping. Then there's the Overland, which is going to start around $42,000 with shipping. And then there's this, the off-roady Rubicon, which will start around $45,000 with shipping. The Gladiator is due to arrive in Jeep dealers in the coming few weeks. Right now, every Gladiator comes with the same engine, a 3.6-liter V6 with 285 horsepower and 260 pound-feet of torque. And you can get an 8-speed automatic or a 6-speed manual. Now, Jeep says that next year, the Gladiator will also add a diesel version with 260 horsepower and 440 pound-feet of torque, which is a really, really impressive figure. It's also worth noting that every Gladiator is a convertible. Yes, every Gladiator, even this one, which looks like it has a fixed roof, is a convertible, meaning the Gladiator joins the convertible pickup ranks with esteemed luminaries like the Chevy SSR and the Dodge Dakota convertible. And so, with the introduction out of the way, time to dive into the Gladiator. First, I'm going to show you all of its interesting quirks and features, then I'm going to get it out on the road and drive it, and then I'm going to give it a Doug score. And for more of my thoughts on the Gladiator, click the link below to visit autotrader.com/oversteer, where I've also compiled a list of the most expensive pickup trucks currently listed for sale on AutoTrader. All right, I'm going to start the quirks and features of the Gladiator with the roof. Now, I mentioned that all Gladiators are convertibles, including this one, and that's true. There are 2 different roofs offered on the Gladiator. One of them you see right here. It's the hardtop, and in this vehicle, it's painted to match the body, and it really does look like it's fixed in place, but it isn't. The hardtop can be fully removed if you want. I'm going to show you how to do that. We'll start with the front panels. Now, there are 2 panels over the front seats, just like in the regular Wrangler, and to remove them, you first undo a couple of latches. There are 4 total on each panel. You undo all of those, and then from there, it's actually really simple. You just kind of climb up and you pull off one of the roof panels, and then you climb up on the other side and you pull off the other roof panel, and then just like that, in like 30 seconds, the front of the hardtop model has now turned into a convertible. But once you've removed those front roof panels, you can see that the back part of the roof is still in place. So you're thinking, well, is that all of a convertible that it is? No, not at all. You can remove the entire rear portion of the hardtop and have a full open air experience, but it's a little bit harder. It requires some tools because there are some bolts holding it in place, not just latches that you unlatch. And it also requires that you disconnect the electrical connection between the car and the rear defroster. The hardtop has a real back window with a defroster, and so if you want to remove the rear part of the hardtop, you have to disconnect that connection. But they've made that pretty easy to do, and I actually watched watched some Jeep people remove the rear part of the hardtop in like 5 minutes. Obviously, they knew what they were doing, but if you plan on removing the hardtop and reinstalling it all the time, you could get to that level pretty easily as well. Now, to me, one of the most interesting parts of the hardtop situation is the fact that the back of the cab in this truck does not have the third brake light on it. Virtually every other pickup you will ever see has the third brake light right up here, but because you can remove the hardtop, Jeep couldn't put the third brake light there since you can take it away, and so instead they had to put the third brake light here on the back of the tailgate. And the problem with that is that if you want to mount a bike rack back here coming out from the tow hitch, it will block your third brake light. And so as a result of that, in order to comply with regulations, Jeep doesn't offer any tail hitch mounted bike racks for this car. Obviously, you can still buy one from another manufacturer and stick it here, but it will block access to your third brake light. Now, one other interesting item worth mentioning about the Gladiator with the hardtop is the fact that it has a real rear window, a glass one. And like I mentioned before, it has a defroster running through it. It even has a little smaller portion of a window inside of it that you can open right up like most pickup trucks do. So if you get the hardtop version of the Gladiator, and I suspect the vast majority of buyers will, you really do have a fully enclosed cab situation like most pickup trucks, and it doesn't become a convertible unless you start removing stuff and taking things apart. Now, next up, I want to talk about the soft top version of the Gladiator. Obviously, this is not the soft top version, but I did have the chance to play around with the soft top version, and obviously, it's a lot easier to go full open air experience if you get the soft top. So the process is pretty simple. The rear window in the soft top is plastic instead of an actual glass window like this. You can see it's just a simple flimsy plastic window. And if you want to remove it, first you start by taking off this little cloth piece on the side. You kind of take it out of this little area where it's held in, and then you just pull it off. It's actually pretty simple. Then you go to the other side, you do basically the same thing, and from there, all you got to do really is just slide the rear window out, and then your entire back window situation is gone. That process took me about a minute total. From there, to go into full convertible mode, it's even easier. Just unlatch 2 latches at the top of the windshield, and then you have to kind of stand on top of the Gladiator and just pull back the top, and the top goes back just like a convertible top does. It's pretty simple. Now, one interesting thing about the folded back convertible top in the Gladiator is the fact that when it is folded back and you're enjoying your open air Gladiator, the top sort of rests above the rear of the cab, sort of above the rear seats. Jeep told me they did this. They didn't want the top to fold into the bed in case you're carrying stuff in the bed. They didn't want the top to have to fold into there, and then you couldn't go into convertible mode unless the bed was empty, and so that's why the top rests there. If you want to fully remove the top, again, this will take some tools. You'll have to just sort of undo the hinges, and then you can pull the top completely off. Now, even though taking off the top and putting it back on in this vehicle is a little bit cumbersome, it's worth noting there is no Velcro, there's no straps, loops, hooks, there's no little buttons that you have to line up and snap into place, and so it's a lot easier than taking off and putting on the top in most other convertible SUVs. Older Wranglers, my Land Rover Defender, obviously it's not as easy as a power top where you just push a button and it goes back, but it's easier than I was expecting. Now, next up, it's time to talk about the bed. I never thought I'd be talking about a pickup truck bed at a Jeep Wrangler from the factory, but I'm glad I have lived to see the day. Now, I mentioned earlier the Gladiator is only available in 4 doors, and it also is only available with a 5-foot bed. This will upset people who wanted a true long bed pickup truck from this vehicle, but I asked Jeep about this. They told me that 80% of the midsize truck segment is crew cab 4 doors with a 5-foot bed, and so they kind of wanted to go after the meaty part of the segment. Plus, Jeep also told me that the 5-foot truck bed will fit 94% of all motorcycles currently on sale. 94% will fit in this bed. Now, before I get into the bed itself, one item I like with this bed is that Jeep is offering this factory tonneau cover, which has a couple of cool features to it. For one, it locks with the tailgate. So if you have the tailgate locked, you can't open up the tonneau cover, and so effectively it works like a trunk. You can put stuff back here and lock it in place, and people can't really break in unless they cut this. And so this is closed with the tailgate. Now, one cool thing about the tonneau cover, when you do open the tailgate in order to access the bed, there is a position of the tonneau cover that you can fold it back just one fold. You don't have to unlatch anything. You don't have to fold it all the way back. You can just fold a small portion of the front part back, and that gives you access to the bed. And you can even have the tailgate closed and access the bed for small items with this slightly folded back position. Now, if you have larger items you want to load back here with the tonneau cover in place, it's pretty easy to get it out of the way. All you do to unlatch it is you pull on these little red straps, and then you kind of just start folding it back, and you fold and you fold and you fold, and it gives you access to basically the entire bed without actually having to remove the tonneau cover. Some covers are just one piece and you have to pull them off, but this can fold up and you can stick basically anything you want back in the bed. Obviously, if you want, you can also remove the tonneau if you have something larger that you want to put back here. And then, of course, when you want to protect your items again, you just fold it back into place. You make sure it latches, and then it's back. You close this, and you can lock everything back up again. It's a pretty simple operation. Now, regarding the actual bed itself, it's pretty much just like a pickup truck bed, nothing particularly exciting, unusual, or interesting back here. I really do like the fact that there is a power outlet back here, and it's covered up by this plastic cover so it won't get damaged by water or anything you might have moving around in the bed. If you want to turn on the power outlet, you press a little button in the interior to the left of the steering wheel. That turns it on, then you can plug stuff in back here, like your toaster, and you can get toast in the bed of your Gladiator. And by the way, it's worth noting that Jeep says the Gladiator has an 1,800-pound payload capacity, which makes this best in class, better than all the real pickup trucks it competes with, like the Tacoma, the Ranger, the Colorado, etc. That's impressive. Next, we move inside the Gladiator, and we move on to my very favorite feature in this entire vehicle, and that is you can get the Gladiator with a built-in portable Bluetooth speaker. Check this out. If you fold forward the rear seat on the passenger side, you can see hidden back there, there is a Bluetooth speaker inside a chargeable docking station. And every time the speaker is placed in there, it charges. Now, you can pull the speaker out of its chargeable docking station, and then you can pair it with your phone and take it anywhere. You don't have to have like the car on or have the Bluetooth speaker near the car. It's just a regular Bluetooth speaker like you would buy. So you can park the car and then go to the beach, go camping, whatever, go on a hike, and you will have your Bluetooth speaker with you, which is so cool. It comes in the car and it's always charged up. Now, maybe the most interesting thing about this Bluetooth speaker is the fact that Jeep told me they engineered it to be automotive grade, so it's a lot more durable than your average Bluetooth speaker. Some of the stuff they told me about it was bizarre. They're like, it has a hook so you can hang it from a tree. And they said it can be submerged underwater for 30 minutes and still work, which is like, okay, when am I going to do that with a Bluetooth speaker? The point is you have a built-in Bluetooth speaker in your vehicle. That is a really smart idea. Now, next up, another great idea with the Gladiator comes in the same vicinity, and that is the fact that there is lockable storage underneath the rear seats. If you flip up the rear seats, you can see there's a little storage compartment under here. And the cool thing is the storage compartment is in the same 60-40 split as the seats. And that means you can flip up the seats and use the storage compartment while you have a passenger sitting in the other seat, which is a really good idea. But the best part of this idea is the fact that it's lockable. You can store whatever you want down here, and then you can see there's a little key lock next to the headrest. There's one on the driver's side, and there is another one on the passenger side. Once you've stored what you want in here, you can lock the seats in place and keep your items safe, and no one can get to them. Jeep says that these lockable compartments underneath the seats have about 3.5 cubic feet of storage space. Not all that much, but enough so you can stick your valuables in there, lock them, keep them safe if you're out hiking or camping and you don't have the tonneau cover to keep your stuff hidden and locked away. It's a really good idea. And one other good idea under the rear seats, and specifically under the rear seat on the driver's side, is bolt storage. You might be wondering why this is here. Well, that's because if you decide you want to take off the windshield or take off the doors, obviously there are some bolts that you pull out and then you won't have a place to put them. They could get lost, but with this little bolt storage container, they won't. And you can see it's clearly marked where you put all the bolts, so you will put them in the right place. Then you will always know exactly where they are when it comes time to put the windshield back in place or to put the doors back on. That is a brilliant idea. Okay, so next up you're thinking, all right, well, I have a place where I can put all of the bolts if I want to remove the doors or take down the windshield, but then what do I have to carry around? Tools and a screwdriver with me everywhere I go if I want to do that? No, you don't. Check this out. If you open the top part of the center console, you will see this little Jeep pouch. You open up that pouch, and there are some tools in there. Those are the only tools you need to remove the doors and take down the windshield and take off the back part of the hardtop in this car. That's it. That's all you need. And then when you do that, you take the bolts and you put them in your little bolt storage area under the back seat. And it's worth noting that the doors really are designed to be removed, just like in prior Jeeps, to the point where Jeep has even integrated a little handle into the door panel that they call the door lift assist feature. Now, you or I might simply call that like a door pull, but they say that that's where you're supposed to grab the door when you're holding it, carrying it after you've removed it, so that you don't drop it or break it, because it's kind of an awkward large piece to carry around. Now, speaking of the doors, one piece of controversy about the Gladiator has been the fact that the rear door is the exact same door you get in the regular Wrangler, which means that it's angled at the bottom. Now, the standard Wrangler, it's angled there to avoid hitting the wheel well, but in the Gladiator, there's no wheel well there, so why didn't they just give you a full door and make it easier to climb in? I asked the Jeep people about this, and the answer was generally that it's easier for production to just have the exact same door on there, and it'll be easier in the aftermarket. It'll be easier if there's an accident. You could just go and get any sort of Wrangler door. You don't have to get a special door that might be a little harder to find because it's unique to the pickup truck version. That's the theory. Now, next up, still on the subject of the doors, another interesting item. Since you can remove the doors, Jeep didn't want to stick too many things on the doors, and that includes the window switches. They didn't want to put them in the traditional spot on the door panel, so instead the window switches are in the middle. They're not mounted on the doors. Same deal in the back seat. They couldn't really put the window switches on the removable doors, so they're in the middle on the back of the center console. That's kind of an interesting solution to the window switch problem, but I especially like Jeep's solution for the reading lights problem. You can't put the reading lights like on the ceiling facing the seats because the roof could be removed, so instead Jeep puts all 4 reading lights, front and rear, on this bar that stays in place even when you have the roof off. And so the front reading lights, you push them and they shine to the front. The rear ones, they're angled towards the back. You push them and they shine to the back. So this whole light assembly is in the middle for all 4 seats. That is a pretty good way to solve that problem. Now, next up, another interesting item in here. In the center console, obviously you have cup holders, but then in between there's a little rectangular area. That is cell phone storage. You're supposed to stick your phone in there. If you're driving along, they have a little pocket for it. And yet another interesting storage spot in this car is at the top of the dashboard. There is another storage panel up there, also large enough for a lot of cell phones. You can stick your phone up there if you need it. Next up, another great feature in the Gladiator is a configurable tire fill alert system. Get this. A lot of off-roaders, when they go off-roading, they like to air down in the tires, lower the air pressure to make it easier to crawl over rocks, whatever. In this vehicle, you can set in the infotainment system what pressure you want to take the tires to, and then you get out, you take the air out of your tires, the car will actually honk the horn when you've reached your desired air pressure, which is a great idea. Then when you're airing back up, you just go into the infotainment system, you set the pressure that you want to air back up to, and again, it honks the horn when you've reached that pressure. Now, next up, another cool quirk of the Gladiator. This particular model has LED headlights for better visibility, but if you get the model with standard headlights, take a look in the center of the headlight. You can see it's the Jeep grille, which is just so cool. Very unnecessary, but it's a nice little quirk, and when you notice it, you just feel a little better about your Jeep. I really think that's cool. And in fact, those little Easter eggs you kind of have to find are hidden all over the Gladiator. For example, the floor mats are like a relief map that you might be using if you're going off-roading, and the rear floor mat actually has like a little prospector logo, like a cross, like this is where the gold is buried, which is a cool little touch. You also have little Jeep logos all throughout the interior. For example, on the top of the gear selector, there's a Jeep. You have a Jeep logo on the wheels. If you look closely, there is a Jeep climbing the windshield, which is a nice little touch. And you also have Jeep logos in the center control stack on buttons. The recirculating climate control button isn't just a generic car, it is a Jeep. And you also have a picture of a Jeep on the little off-road cruise control button in the center control stack, which is very cool. But my personal favorite favorite is the little Jeep that drives across the screen in the gauge cluster when you start the car. You have this little Jeep that sort of is on an adventure across the screen. It's very cool. I love all these little hidden Jeep Easter eggs that you kind of have to look for. And by the way, yes, I did just mention an off-road cruise control feature. Jeep calls it Select Speed, and you turn it on by pressing that little Jeep button in the center control stack. You have to be going less than 5 miles an hour and in four-wheel drive low, and then you can turn it on and the car will sort of guide itself over various obstacles and terrain off-road. If you get stuck, it'll perfectly modulate the amount of power it sends to the wheels to try to get you unstuck. That's the level of technology we're in, off-roading cruise control. Now, next up on the outside of the Gladiator, I want to cover a few other interesting topics, starting with the wheels. Now, these look like the regular wheels from the Wrangler, but Jeep told me they actually had to make the wheels stronger in the Gladiator for towing. And so these wheels are actually different than Wrangler wheels. They are stronger. More interesting, though, is the grille. This may look like the regular Jeep Wrangler grille, but it isn't. They had to widen the openings for better airflow, also for towing. And so the Gladiator has a different grille. And speaking of the grille, one item you might notice in the grille, there is a camera. Jeep calls this a trail cam. And the theory here is if you're off-roading, you can't really see like the rocks you might be crawling over. Since you're sitting up there, you can't always see what's directly in front of you. So you turn on the trail cam and then you can see precisely what's in front of you in very high resolution. And there are even little guidelines that show exactly where you're going, what you're about to run over. Now, obviously, if you're off-roading, the trail cam is going to get dirty. And so there is a little squirter on the trail cam. You can turn it on in the infotainment system. You just tell it to clean the front camera, and then it will squirt water at the front camera in order to clear it of whatever debris might be on it so that you can continue to see what obstacles you're about to run over. Pretty good idea. Now, that front camera system is unique to this version of the Gladiator. Like I mentioned before, this is the off-roady Rubicon model, and it comes with a bunch of off-road upgrades over the regular Gladiator. For example, all Gladiator models are four-wheel drive, but the Rubicon adds locking differentials. You can activate them by flipping this little switch in the center control stack, front and rear, or rear only, both for particularly difficult off-roading situations. Now, the Rubicon model also adds a few other things. To the right of the differential lockers, you have something called Off-Road Plus, and you can turn that on and you can go into sand mode or rock mode depending on whether you're in 4 high or 4 low. There's also a button below Off-Road Plus where you can disconnect the sway bars, also for difficult off-roading situations. And the Rubicon's off-road upgrades go beyond just that stuff. There's also a few items on the outside. For example, the Rubicon gets its own hood. It has its own distinctive Rubicon hood, and the fender flares are higher in the Rubicon models to allow for more wheel and tire travel if you're off-roading. And speaking of tires, the Rubicon comes standard with 33-inch off-road tires. And Jeep told me you can swap in 35-inch off-road tires without doing a lift or any other upgrades. You can just do it straight away when you buy one of these. The Rubicon version also comes standard with steel bumpers instead of crappy plastic bumpers. These are stronger if you bump into stuff, but also they're winch capable. You can pull off this little front panel and you can mount a winch directly on the factory bumper, which is an upgrade from normal. Usually you have to go into the aftermarket if you want to convert to a winch-capable steel bumper. The Rubicon also comes with Fox shocks, the suspension, which of course will also help you when you're off-roading. And here is a rather interesting item. You've heard of rock rails that go along the sides of off-road vehicles to protect the sides when you're off-roading. This also has rock rails for the bed. Behind the rear wheels, there are rock rails mounted back there. That's because the bed of the Gladiator hanging out back there so far is kind of the weak point when you're off-roading. Check this out. The Wrangler's departure angle in back is 37 degrees, but the Gladiator's is only 26 degrees because of that bed. So you might have trouble clearing stuff and you might scrape against things, and that's why there are rock rails behind the rear wheels. An unusual item, but this is an unusual vehicle. Now, it's worth noting that so far I have only shown you the factory stock quirks and features of the Gladiator, but there are endless customization options that you can pursue through Mopar, which is Chrysler's aftermarket parts and performance catalog. For example, if you want to swap out your regular doors for these tube doors, you can do that. And check this out. If you do that, the way to open the tube doors, there's this little red latch that says eject. You have to reach in, pull it, and that's how you will get in and out of your Gladiator, equipped with the Mopar tube doors. Now, next up, another interesting Mopar accessory you can get is this unusual sliding door system in the bed. Check this out. You mount this thing back here, and then you have like little drawers where you can stick stuff. And Jeep told me that this system can take the entire payload capacity on top of it. So after you've already put it in the bed, you can stick 1,600 pounds on top of it and it won't break, in case you want to fill your bed with this and then fill it with some more stuff. Now, next up, I want to cover the Gladiator's infotainment system. I've already covered Chrysler's infotainment system in a few other vehicles, the new Jeep Wrangler, the Grand Cherokee Trackhawk, and I'll link those videos in the description below. But for now, there are a few other items worth mentioning, starting with this rubber surround around the infotainment screen. I love this because then it makes sure that water won't like enter your screen if you have the roof off, if you have the windshield down and it starts to rain a little bit. They've protected it, knowing that people are going to use this in all sorts of weather and trail conditions. Another item I like in the infotainment system, a lot of the SRT performance Chrysler models have a performance pages item in there where you can see like lap times, whatever. This has an off-road pages feature, and if you click on it, you have a couple of different things you can check out. One is like the current pitch and roll of the vehicle where it's sitting right now. You can also check various gauges, pressures, temperatures to make sure nothing is going too crazy when you're out on the trails. Next, you can check the current status of the drivetrain. Are you in 4 high, 4 low, 2-wheel drive? Do you have the differentials locked? That sort of thing. And you can also access the trail cam through here, the front-facing camera that looks at what you're about to run over, which is a nice touch. And take a look with this little Gladiator logo in the upper left. You can also switch between the front and rear cameras, which I also love. I think that looks really cool. And finally, one more interesting quirk of the Gladiator before I go and drive it. Now, Jeep told me they're going to launch the Gladiator with a special launch edition model. Now, usually those are kind of stupid, and this one is too. It's got like special paint or special wheels, and it has all the options, and it costs like 60 grand. Normally, I wouldn't even mention it, but one detail about it piqued my interest. Jeep is going to build 4,190 Gladiator launch editions to commemorate the fact that the area code in Toledo, where this is built, is 419. So 419, 4190, and that's sort of the ultimate little Gladiator Easter egg. Anyway, with that in mind, that's a tour of the Gladiator and all of its quirks and features. Now it's time to get it out on the road and see how it drives. All right, driving the Gladiator. Now, before I get into the driving experience, I want to discuss pricing briefly because I spent a lot of time looking this up. Now, Gladiator starts around $35,000 with shipping, which sounds like a lot compared to the Tacoma, which starts around $27,000 with shipping. But every Gladiator is a quad cab with a big V6, and every Gladiator has 4-wheel drive. You equip a Tacoma with those things, and you're at $33,300, meaning the Gladiator is only about $1,500 more expensive. Now, the Rubicon Gladiator starts around $45,000, also a big number, but the Tacoma TRD Pro starts at $44,000. That's the competitor. And I gotta tell you, the Gladiator's a little more expensive, but surprisingly little, and this is way cooler than the Tacoma, and I love the Tacoma. It's a great, robust, cool truck, but this is cooler, and I think financially it makes more sense than I expected it to. I thought this was going to end up being more expensive than it actually is. Driving experience, primarily, it just drives like a JL Wrangler. Not all that surprising, same engine, it's the same basic cab kind of thing. They say there's a new frame, blah, 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 but generally speaking, it's the same idea. There are a couple of differances. The biggest is acceleration. It just doesn't feel quite as fast as the JL Wrangler, which is a bit of a shame because I don't consider the JL to be a fast vehicle. Highway on-ramps, whatever, it's fine, it gets up to speed, but it doesn't feel fast. And it's the same story when you're going around corners. This feels less nimble than a Wrangler. And again, the Wrangler's not a vehicle that I necessarily consider to be nimble, so this is even more kind of like moseying along. I also want to talk about rear seat room for a minute. Jeep said, oh, it's great, got a lot of rear seat room. I think it's only okay. It certainly isn't like a full-size pickup, although that's not what it's intending to be. It's similar to Tacoma, to Colorado, but there's not a ton of rear seat room. You could use it as a family car, but it's not huge back there, so you want to test that out before you actually try to. With those things out of the way, I think otherwise this is a really competent, capable vehicle. Very usable, drives well, exactly as you'd expect. Despite the fact that like most of this car, the windshield folds down, the roof comes off, the doors come off, there's no rattles. It's actually surprisingly well put together, it seems. Driving position is good. You have a commanding view of the road. You're sitting up high. It looks good. I will say one thing I would change, the mirrors are the same as the ones from the Wrangler, but this is a longer vehicle, so it has bigger blind spots. So sometimes cars get lost more in your blind spot with these mirrors. I wish they were a little bit wider. But beyond that, you expect a Wrangler, get a Wrangler, and actually it's good. You know, the new Wrangler is a great vehicle, and so that's not really a drawback. You get a lot of cool tech, you get a lot of nice features. Now, you might be wondering about a potential V8 version. I asked the Jeep people that, and it was very clear to me it's not even really on the table. They said emission stuff, it's just too difficult, leave it for the aftermarket. And there are swaps, V8 swaps in these, but it doesn't seem like that's actually gonna be something that's coming. I think that's kind of a shame. It would be nice to have like a Raptor version of this. I do think it would sell, and I think it would sell pretty well, but let's just be happy that they made it. And I think they did it really well. It was well executed, it drives well, it feels good, it has a lot of cool quirks and features, and I just think it's a fantastic execution of something that people have been wanting for a long period of time. And so that's the 2020 Jeep Gladiator. This is not the world's most capable pickup, since it only has a 5-foot bed with no longer bed option. And it's not the world's most capable off-road SUV due to its size, and it's not the world's best convertible, since, you know, it's not like a top-down sports car, but no other vehicle can do all three. And for that, it's hard not to love the Gladiator. And now it's time to give it a Doug score. Starting with the weekend categories and styling, I think the Gladiator looks good, but some people seem to think a truck bed tacked onto a Wrangler is a bit awkward, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Acceleration, it does 0 to 60 in a bit over 7 seconds, and it gets a 1 out of 10. Handling is fine for what it is, but not great overall, and it gets a 3 out of 10. Fun factor is huge. It's a top-down off-road pickup. There's nothing you can't do in this thing, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Cool factor is also very high right now. It gets a 6 out of 10 for a total weekend score of 24 out of 50. Next up are the daily categories and features. The Gladiator has a surprisingly high level of equipment. The one I drove had adaptive cruise control and off-road cruise control and blind spot monitoring, and of course it's a convertible and a truck too, and it gets a 6 out of 10. Comfort is fine, and it gets a 5 out of 10. Quality is only okay. Chrysler quality is always a little suspect, and I've heard some stories about the JL Wrangler. It gets a 6 out of 10. Practicality is high with 4 seats and a decent-sized truck bed, and it gets an 8 out of 10. Finally, value is surprisingly high due to lower prices than I was expecting. It gets an 8 out of 10 for a total daily score of 33 out of 50. Added up, and the Doug score is 57 out of 100, and here it is compared to rivals. It easily beats out the Chevy Colorado ZR2 and Ford Ranger. It's just cooler, more capable, more fun, and it even beats out the Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro for the same reason. Amazingly, it also beats out the Wrangler. The Wrangler is more fun to drive, but the Gladiator has a higher daily score with a little more equipment and a little better value score versus rivals. The Gladiator only loses to the Raptor, which is just more fun, faster, and better looking, but obviously a lot more expensive.